Hello, welcome to Helen and Joey Estate. From the outset, just like to acknowledge that we're standing on Wurundjeri land. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's quite awesome to think that we're standing in a landscape that people have lived in for tens and tens of thousands of years. Helen and Joey Estate is a wine farm predominantly. It was purchased in 2010 by Helen and Joey, but the vineyard itself was planted in the mid-1990s. We grow quite a few different grape varieties here, but more importantly we make wines for different purposes. As a little bit later on you'll see that we've got a great big outside sort of casual area, and we try to run with a bit of a casual and really inclusive vibe. All people are welcome here. Perhaps less so those that are intolerant, but pretty much all people. The wines that we make, I'll actually go through those towards the end of this this little segment. The Yarra Valley for us is a region that is all about making true fruited wines. Many parts of Australia make sensational wines, but they do tend to be quite heavy, especially the fuller bodied reds. In the Yarra Valley, we think that the wine styles really need to evoke an idea of light and space, and sort of tell a story of I guess its uniqueness, rather than trying to conform to a general idea of what wine should be. The three parts of the farm, really important part of our farm is this wooded block behind here. That's about 30 hectares of gum forest, woodland. We also have a bit of pasture with some black Angus steers and 3 alpacas that happen to come with the farm. We've planted several thousand cherry trees, and then we also have about 80 acres of vineyard. At the moment there's some replanting going on, so not all of it is bearing. The vines directly in front of where we're standing now, that's a west-facing block, all planted to Pinot Noir. So what we might do is go for a walk down into the vineyard and have a bit of a look at how the vines are sort of proceeding in this reasonably early part of spring. If this were a period of time that wasn't sort of covered by pandemic restrictions, this being the weekend, we would have probably 50 or 60 people here nearly all Saturday and Sunday, and we really are missing people. So hopefully in another 2 weeks we can start welcoming you all back. On the way to the vineyard, partially inspired by Yarra Ranges Regional Tourism's garden party, we've decided that we need to keep ourselves busy, and we've started the installation of a barrel garden that we intend to grow a combination of food plants, but also introduce bits of aquaculture, perhaps have a bit of a pond in a barrel with some fish in it. Lots of motivation coming from this whole idea of getting out in gardens. As part of that as well, we went on a bit of a scrounge around the farm looking for large rocks. So this is all, if you like, if you want to use a fancy French term that gets thrown around about wine, this is a part of our terroir. So again, some of the oldest geology on the planet. Not a geologist myself, but I have an understanding that these rocks were formed on the bottom of the ocean some 400 or older than 400 million years ago, and at some point round about then the actual oceans receded, and this part of the Australian landscape emerged. So we are actually talking about one of the most ancient landscapes on the planet. Vineyard. So these are Pinot Noir vines on the original kind of rootstock that was planted in 1996. So 24-year-old vines. They're in that point of their life where they've reached a reasonable level of maturity. These shoots first started emerging in, I think, the Pinot, it was about the second week of September. So you're looking at about 3 weeks growth on these. By the time we actually get to the height of summer and the vegetative part of the growth of the vine is complete, they will be quite up somewhere around about here. But you can actually see, if you're getting close, the formation of what will end up being the Pinot Noir grapes. Pinot Noir's kind of a pretty cool thing around the Yarra Valley. Most of Australia is way too hot for these vines, but the slightly cooler climate of the Yarra Valley does work wonderfully. Light, fresh, aromatic styles of red wines. In the cycle of the seasons, coming through spring, it is mostly about vegetative growth, and then when we hit December and into January, we'll start to see ripening occur, and then harvest for our wines will be anywhere between early first week of February, and we can continue picking sometimes into April. Funnily enough, we used to pick March and sometimes into May, and so I think we're all aware now that global warming isn't in our future. It's well and truly here. We do on average pick about 3 to 4 weeks earlier than we used to in the Yarra Valley. Some of the moving around of vines that we're doing and the replanting is actually now taking into account for that future sort of climate change, looking at planting some more later ripening varieties and some varieties that are a bit more heat tolerant. So once we've picked, the vines generally stay alive for another 4 to 6 weeks before falling into winter dormancy. You can actually see, so coming into winter, we had vines up here, they go dry, everything gets cut back right back down to the base wood again, ready for the season's new growth. And by the way, I should have introduced myself. So my name's Stephen. I've been working at Helen Joey Estate now for nearly 5 years, I think it is. And I've been in the Yarra Valley since 19, how long? Let's call it nearly 20 years. It's not the 1990s at all. But my role around here, we were actually a really, really small team. So a lot of our roles sort of cross over. I'm kind of in charge of the hospitality, tourism and bits of marketing around here. But certainly through COVID times, but in general times as well, we have found lots of other things to keep ourselves busy. So it's nothing for us to find ourselves out in the vines. Quite often we're helping out the vineyard manager. The last few weeks, again, kind of winter jobs, and then coming into spring, we actually do need to get things ready for the new harvest. A lot of that is actually about getting wine into bottle. So we've been doing lots of kind of tasting and working out what goes where and allocating barrels and tanks of wine to different products. There's never really a dull moment in the world of wine. There's always something to be done. As we move into cellar door, you're actually even going to see that we've because we haven't been able to be open, we've actually established a little bottling line in there. So we've been doing our own bottling of some of our smaller runs of premium product. And something else quite exciting, I'm getting quite thirsty. We've just introduced a new range of wines in cans, starting with the dry rosé. So I might actually go and grab a can of rosé and talk you through some of our ranges of wine. So here we are. This is the most fun wine that we make. We're eventually going to make 4 of these. The first one that we put out is a rosé can that has just a tiny bit of fizz. Super thirst quenching and nice little bit of fizz. The idea with this fizz is not highly effervescent, it just gives a really nice creaminess, but it is deliciously thirst quenching. And a little bit dangerous. It's a proper grown-up, like quite often people see products in cans and sometimes it seems like a particular demographic is being targeted. With our wine cans we've kept the sugar levels down really quite low, but it is made on a proper full strength wine base. Anyway, fun, lifestyle. It tells a big story about who we are in Australia. Like, if we're being super honest with ourselves, we would acknowledge that sometimes we don't even need to be thirsty to drink wine. Sometimes our ever-present fear in this country of getting thirsty is enough reason. And so that's kind of inspired us to make these perfect wines for a garden party. It's also inspired us when we reopen, as well as having the food offering that we've been doing here, we're actually going to start doing picnic hampers with cans included. Really trying to look forward optimistically to many good shared times when we can all get back together again. Anyway, let's go up to cellar door and have a look at some other wines as well. So, welcome to our cellar door and bottling line. Cellar door doesn't normally look like this industrial. As I said, at the moment we're doing a lot of work actually clearing out barrels and tanks, finishing wines off so that we, well, because they're ready, but also so that we actually have space to make more wine this coming season. After I've just spoken a little bit about the wines, I'll give you a little tour of our production facility. At the moment, it's reasonably small. Not everything that we make can be made here, which is why, and you won't see that today, but on the other side of the farm there's a bit of construction going on so that we will actually have a winery that's large enough so that we can do all of our own processing of the fruit. With 80 acres of grapes, we're capable of making about 20,000 dozen. So in the Australian scale, that makes us kind of the big end of small, but still small. In the Yarra Valley scale of things, we are a reasonably substantial producer. So not saying that we make a lot of wine on a global scale, but we do make a lot of different wines. And again, the idea with our philosophy is, one, make wines that are fun, and then secondly, also make wines that are a true representation of place. They're two kind of slightly different pathways. So the fun end is here, cans, and then also the Nara range. So one of the interpretations of the name Anara, it's an ancient name that came down from a group of people in the Mediterranean area in the Bronze Age called the Hittites. Anara was a bit of a legend. She was a goddess that was she became Artemis and Diana in Greek and Roman mythology. But one of the interpretations of the name is to talk about a joyfulness and a degree of fun. So in those wines we kind of make a sparkling wine, a rosé, there's a couple of whites, and then 3 different reds, and they're really all designed for that whole idea of unpretentious drinking. The sort of events where no one's doing food and wine matching, but you've got a 6-pack of bubbles in the bath covered in ice. Lots of people are coming around. You need a six-pack of red to go out with whatever's coming off the barbecue. Everyone's drinking rosé. It's a wine with that sort of vibe. Then we also make a range of wines that we call Wayward Child. And so there's actually 6 in the range. These are the wines where it really is about the uniqueness of place and that whole idea of exploring what the Yarra Valley is. The wines are made with very, very little intervention. There's no filtering, there's no fining, there's no additions or subtractions. We make an orange wine from Pinot Gris where we leave the wine on skins. There's 2 field blends in the red range. There's a field blend white. There's an unfiltered Pinot. We also make a little sweet wine called Bastion. It's fortified. So it comes with a dad joke, given that a bastion is a part of the fortifications of the castle. Sorry, dad joke. Unique wines of place. Our most recent edition is named after another Hittite goddess, the mother of all goddess, Hannah, or Mother. I'm particularly excited about this wine in that it really does show a sense of my idea of what this region is. And in the case of this, there are smells and characters that actually remind me of standing under giant trees up in the mountains around here and walking into rainforest gullies. It's got this really sapid, almost fern-like herbal character. It's beautifully, it's just one of those wines that draws you in. It's got a savoury dimension, but more than that, it's not one of those wines that wants to jump out of the glass and slap you around the face. It's more seductive, it draws you in, you keep looking. And that's kind of what we're looking to do at Helen and Joey, find that degree of elegance. I've got a friend in the wine industry, a really unbelievably good winemaker, who's was described by an American wine writer as the Wizard of Oz, and she actually described him as a clairvoyant winemaker. And he has spent time making wine in Europe, and he talks about Europe as being the being drama kind of in the geology, in the earth, whereas he's quite certain that in Australia all of our drama, all of our small differences, Australian terroir, if you like, is somehow in the air. And so this is kind of what we're looking to express in the Yarra Valley, or with our idea of expressing our farm in the Yarra Valley. And perhaps these other 2 ranges of wine, they're kind of 2 different takes on an idea of Yarra Valley classics. The Layla is kind of Chardonnay and Pinot only, with the idea being that they are, in the cliche, what the Yarra Valley does best. Again, the Yarra Valley is very diverse. It all depends on where you are in the Yarra Valley. But this Chardonnay and Pinot, they're kind of made in a way where there isn't too much of an overlay of flavour from ingredients. So they do go into oak barrels, but we don't use any new barrels when we actually mature these wines. It's barrels that have been recently purchased that still actually have all the capacity to input flavour. So that, again, more towards the light and fresh. Perhaps what you would describe as the more contemporary sort of expression of Yarra Valley varietal wines. And then we also have these black label wines, Lena. They are Yarra Valley fruit picked a bit later, a bit riper, a bit richer, and then we do actually put in that overlay of a much stronger oakiness. Again, like, we're not trying to make wines that we think are right. We're trying to make wines that, use the word again, inclusive. We want to make wines for everybody. We recognise that some people like these more classical, global idea of what posh wine looks like. But at the same time, we want to make things that are also fun and fresh.
the highest level of inclusion, and very unusual in the Yarra Valley. We also make some sweet wines. This is our late harvest Merlot. It's not fortified, it's reasonably low in alcohol. It's not syrupy. So syrupy wines will sometimes be up to 300 grams of sugar per litre of wine. These ones sit at around about 50. They're made more as just easy drinking, afternoon tipples, you're having afternoon tea. Some of the younger staff here suggest that it's the sort of wine you might want to put with your cornflakes, not on them, but could make a great breakfast wine for those that are young enough to have that level of fortitude in their systems. Okay, perhaps what we'll do now is I'll just walk you quickly through the winery, talk a little bit about winemaking techniques. It'll be a bit back to front because we're going to start in the barrel room. It's adjacent to our cellar door, which creates this whole sense that there is a lot of interaction between the winemaking team and everybody else. So again, when you come up here, our staff are pretty intimate with everything that goes on here. Because it's not really happening in a factory somewhere else, it's all happening around them. So here we are, boring white room with some very, very expensive pieces of wood around. Sometimes in the wine industry, again, this idea that wines get better the more expensive they are. Sometimes it's actually just about style. So these barrels, depending on the size and depending on the nature of the wood that's been made, it's all French oak. They cost anywhere between $2,000 and sometimes nearly up to $4,000 each. So when you're actually drinking a more oaky wine style, if that's what you like, yeah, you're paying more. So some of that does have a lot to do with cost of goods. This is nearly empty at the moment, so the only wines that are left in here are basically some 2020 fuller body, but all 2020 reds, and a lot of that's going to be prepared for bottling, possibly this side of Christmas or just the other side, so that we're ready to go for the new vintage. But even with the 2020s, the lighter reds are done and dusted. They're off for bottling. All the whites, with the exception of the more oaky Chardonnay, they've all gone. Don't get too excited about the scale of our winery. It's not going to take very, very long to give you this little tour. But all the oak you see out here now is empty. It's basically being cleaned. Barrel hygiene is very, very important when you're talking about a natural sort of product. So they've all been cleaned and sort of what we do is we actually put in a solution of sulfur and tartaric acid and swirl it around to kill any nasty bugs, and then it sits in storage awaiting the new harvest. This bit of wood here that's all wrapped up probably doesn't look all that photogenic. When it's unwrapped, it's so photogenic. This is a super old school pre-industrial wooden fermenter. Our winemaker Stephen, that's his favourite toy in the whole place. And it's about the right size as well, so that when we throw whole bunches of grapes in here, we actually do get to climb in and jump up and down. And that's something that gets used just for making one of our Wayward Child Reds. And then the rest of the winery, classically Australian, it's just a big friggin' shed. Some of the really significant bits of machinery are kind of in behind the barrels. In behind here is a big press. Big press is kind of like having a barrel with holes in it and then a big inflatable airbag. What we do is we pour the grapes on top, and
the grapes are effectively pushed through a sieve so that all the solids are held behind. That's the first stage of white wine making, and then a latter stage for red wine making. Red wine making, everything just gets thrown in, grape skins and all, whereas white is just juice. And then a winery really is nothing much more than big containers. There's a joke in the wine industry where we actually say that winemaking is about three things. It's about cleaning really big things, and that's probably about 60% of it. And then it's about 30% lifting heavy things, and the other 10% is drinking beer. That's kind of winemaking in a nutshell. So this is kind of how we often end our days. I should have brought my rosé can with me. But we're coming into the sunset period. We're quite excited. This summer, on Saturdays and possibly some Sundays, we're actually going to try and stay open for twilight so that people can enjoy more of these beautiful sunsets. In winding up, I'd like to thank Yarra Ranges Tourism Marketing for inviting us to be part of this wonderful weekend of virtual garden parties. We are so looking forward to that moment where we can actually convert that into actuals, and we'd really like you all to feel such a warm welcome and to come and visit. We'll be open 7 days a week from the 20th of October, should Daniel Andrews' plan stay in place. Go to our website if you want to be looking around for ways to book. It's quite likely that the bookings are going to be needed as we open up because we can't have our full numbers. We found a couple of ways of dealing with that. We're buying in a lot of picnic blankets so that you can order your picnic hampers and go and sit on the grass and be socially distanced. And as I said before, we are so looking forward to seeing people again. If you haven't noticed, some of us find our ways into this industry simply because we do like to talk. So the social isolation has been pretty hard for people that like hospo. So thank you all again, and hopefully we see you soon. By the way, I didn't forget to mention something. We have unicorns. Can be a little hard to explain, but let's just suggest that Helen, the owner of Helen Joey Estate and the driving force, she's a little bit obsessed with unicorns, and I think has been for a long time. This unicorn is Bruce. Does have his own little following and hashtag activity on Instagram in particular. So not only would I welcome you, Bruce welcomes you as well.